Alright, let's talk selections. You guys have a great assignment this week that is hopefully going to help you get to know a lot of the tools that we're going to be looking at today or this week with this chapter and exercise. Our selection tools, we have a number of them. I'm going to highlight a few of them for you here today. The book's going to take you through quite a few. The lecture should introduce quite a few to you as well. Most of our tools are going to fall into two categories. They're going to be a tool that it's going to be based on your interaction, so a tool-based selection. Excuse me. I said all your tools are going to be based. I meant to say your selections are going to fall into two categories, not your tools are going to fall into two categories. So your selections are going to fall into two categories. They're going to be tool-based, which it's going to be based on your interaction with the software, and then there's going to be color-based selections, and then we have a couple of hybrids. Let's start with the tool-based selections. The tool-based selections are very easy to understand. We're going to start with the marquee selections. That's up here, the second from the top on the tools palette. We have a few different marquee selections. We have rectangular, we have elliptical, we have single row and single column. I can tell you that I don't use single row or single column very much at all. In fact, it's so seldom that I can't even think of a good example right now. We're going to focus on the rectangle and the elliptical marquee. Rectangular marquee, of course, is going to give us a rectangle. I'm going to click and hold my mouse button, and I'm going to drag. And it's going to give me marching ants based on the drawing of a rectangle that I've created with that tool. And that area is now selected. What that means is I will be able to manipulate that area and that area only. Now I'm going to save that. I want to show you the selection tools before I get into what you can actually do with the selection tools. I don't want to confuse things. I just want to show you different selection tools and then show you what can be done once we actually do isolate with the selection tools. So that's a rectangular marquee. Very easy to understand. The dialog of the marching ants gives us the boundaries. Now I have the elliptical, and it's of course going to give us an ellipse. Now you're going to see that we have so many different selection tools. The reason is that you're going to run into different situations where one selection tool isn't going to do it. Obviously, not all of our selections are going to be elliptical or rectangular. You're going to come into all kinds of different situations, and these tools all have their purpose. So what you have to do is get to know all these different selection tools, play with them, and then you'll begin to understand what situations might have certain advantages with certain selection tools. So these were our fixed shapes in our tools, the marquee selection tools. Then we also have some freeform selection tools, and they're mostly going to be over here right underneath our marquee selection tools. We have the lasso or the freeform selection tools here. The lasso tools are pretty cool. We're going to start with just the basic lasso. We have three different types you can see here. Lasso tool, polygonal lasso tool, and then the magnetic lasso tool. I'll take them in order. So here with the lasso tool, basically what's going to happen is I'm going to click and I'm going to draw a line. I'm going to drag and draw a line. And whatever I draw is going to become my selection, which gives me the ability to create irregular shapes. Okay, so yes, there are going to be some situations where a geometric shape is going to be perfect for us, but most situations are going to require some irregular selections. That's where some of these other tools are going to come in. So that was our lasso tool. It's going to do exactly what I tell it to do, no more, no less. I will draw, it will create a selection based on what I draw. The next tool is the Polygonal Lasso tool, and of course, yes, it creates polygons. Instead of clicking and dragging and making a line, I'm going to click to create points. Every time I click, I make a new point. So I can make some very interesting polygons to create selections with, as you can see there with the marching ants. It's a very handy tool. The next tool is really a hybrid tool. Oops, sorry about that. I'll put my hand on my mouse pad there. The next tool is really a hybrid tool. This is where we're going to begin to go from a tool-based selection to color-based selections. This is kind of in between, and this is our magnetic lasso tool. What the magnetic lasso tool is going to do is it's going to look for difference, and it's going to try and help us to draw. So I'm going to zoom in with our zoom tool here. I'm going to try to show you what we're talking about here. So the magnetic lasso tool is going to work a lot like my lasso tool. I'm going to click and I'm going to drag, and it's going to draw a line based on where I drag. However, in addition to that, my lasso tool, because it is magnetic, is also going to look for areas of difference or contrast to try and snap to. You see how the line is kind of jumping around, and there it dropped a node. It's dropping around, and it doesn't want to find the end there. This is one of the cool things about the magnetic lasso tool. It didn't find anything there. I'm going to click, it's going to drop one of those nodes. Click, so I can help it along, like there. So it's going to help me out in creating a selection. Oh, I don't like what it's doing there. I'm going to go back, lay some of those nodes down. Now, I'm not going to make you watch me go through and do this whole thing. What I do want to show you, though, is what happens if I do this? Oh, gosh. I have totally messed up my selection. I'm really unhappy right now. What I'm going to do is I'm actually going to go back here. And I'm going to hit the backspace key on the keyboard. And look what happens. Where those nodes are going away. It's going to delete the nodes when I hit the backspace key. So I can actually clean up a selection. And this happens a lot. Sometimes you're making a selection. You hit the space bar. The space bar allows you to move around the photograph, coincidentally. And then you let go, and everything goes haywire, and your selection gets crazy. So, that does happen sometimes. But that's the magnetic lasso tool. Very cool tool. Hybrid. It is both based on what you're doing with the tool and the information in the photograph, the contrast, the colors. Very, very cool tool. The next one I'm going to show you, I'm going to get into our color-based tools. Now, you've actually already played with some of these. You did a color range selection in a previous exercise in the last module. But I'll show you that again, just so that we're building, or getting a little bit of reinforcement here, and also to start the conversation on some of the other tools. So obviously, I have a photograph here that has some pretty predominant colors in it. I have a lot of green, and then I have a lot of purple pinks. So based on my understanding of how color selection tools, I know that I can get selections really nicely based on color in this photograph. I'm going to go up to my selection menu, and I'm going to tell it I want color range, and then it's actually going to jump out and try and pick something for me. I think it has no, it didn't have the green, it had everything else. But see, when I click on the colors, it's showing me what colors are selected in this. Oh, and coincidentally, I know it tells you to in the book, don't use image, because I don't even know why they have that option there. It doesn't show you anything. Always choose selection. So it's selecting based on the color in the image. So very cool. We have some options here. This is going to add to my selection and subtract to my selection. I want multiple greens. I'm going to click the Add to Selection tool. And you see now it just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. I'm just clicking and dragging across those greens because I want all of them. Very, very, very handy. I'm going to click OK, and there we go. I've selected all the greens in that gamut there. We also have a couple other tools that are going to behave somewhat similarly. The Magic Wand tool, which is underneath the Quick Select tool. We're just kind of going down here. We start out with the Move tool, Marquee Selection, Freeform Selections, and now into the color-based selection tools. We have the Magic Wand and the Quick Select. I'm going to start with the Magic Wand. The Magic Wand is going to behave a whole lot like the Color Selection tool. By default, up here on the Options bar, you're going to see that Contiguous is selected, so that it's just going to stop when it finds enough difference in colors. I'm going to deselect that there. The command for deselect is Control D on the keyboard. You can also go to select and deselect. It's not highlighted right now because I don't have a selection. But let's see what happens if we turn off the contiguous option. It has selected all of the green colors. So it is exactly like our color selection tool if we turn off that contiguous option. And then I'll show you here. Select. Now deselect is actually highlighted because I have a selection. Okay, so that's how our magic wand works. And then the last one is the quick select. And it's kind of like a paintbrush crossed with a color selection tool. It's going to try and guess at what you want to select based on colors by what you paint. And it can be a little aggressive. At first it's actually a bit of a pain, but you get used to it. Now, this brings me to some of the other functions that I want to share with you here. Adding and subtracting from selections. If I don't get a selection right, that doesn't mean that I just pitch the selection and quit. It's very easy for me to manipulate a selection, add, subtract from a selection by using keys on the keyboard. In this case, we're going to be using the Shift and the Alt keys. Shift adds to a selection, and Alt subtracts from a selection. Now I'm going to show you how this, you can see that this tool actually defaults to, as I click, it's going to add to the selection anyway. That's just how it defaults to. But let's say I hold, let's see what happens when I hit the Alt key. See how that's turning from a plus to a minus? I can get rid of some of those areas, like the black, that maybe I didn't want. Now with the quick select tool, you can see it's brush based. I can actually increase and decrease the size of the brush up here on the options, and that's going to help me make finer selections, fine-tune my selections. The bigger my brush is, the more aggressive the brush will be. The smaller my brush is, the less aggressive the brush will be. So that'll help me out. So I'm holding Alt to subtract from the selection right now to try and get away from some of those dark colors. Now let me show you, I'm going to Control D for deselect, how to add to the selection as well. Obviously that tool does so by default. Now if I create a marquee selection and then make another marquee selection, they just kind of go away every time I make another marquee selection. If I hold Shift, however, I'm now adding to my selection. And then I can hold Alt to subtract from my selection, and I can create some very interesting selections. Kind of funky things going on here, you know. Kind of artistic. I'm going to leave that selection because that's going to bring us to some of our other tools. Before I get to that, actually, I want to show you one last thing. I want to show you refine edges. You'll notice for every one of our selection tools, the options may change a little bit for the selection tools, but the only thing one thing that's going to stay the same is this box that says refine edges. This is an excellent tool, very cool tool. It's going to launch this dialog box, and what the refine edges tool is going to do is it's going to allow us to do things like expand and contract the selection. You can see what's going on there. Feathering, which as you saw in the module is the partial selection of pixels. It makes it possible for pixels to be partially selected. It fuzzies the edges there. Fuzzies. Softens the edges. It's because some of those pixels are selected, some of them are not. You can smooth a selection, so if you had a really complex one, it's not going to show up here because this is very geometric, so the smooth is not going to do anything to this. Really, it's just not going to do a whole lot for us at all. You can also change the radius, which is going to kind of affect the feathering. Contrast is also going to affect the feathering as well. These are kind of I don't use these as much. They're a little bit tricky to understand. We might talk about them further in the semester. These down here, very easy to use, very easy to understand. And again, as far as the previews go, I really like this preview here. Don't know why what this preview is all about. It just doesn't show you very much. The Rubylith overlay, kind of nice. It shows you the image and the selection at the same time. That's kind of okay. That's what I really like. This, absolutely useless. I don't even know what this is all about. So I just basically stick with that default there. But great dialog box. It used to be that you couldn't see when you did these things. We had the ability to feather and expand and contract, but you didn't get a preview of it. You just kind of had to guess. It was kind of a pain in the keister. Alright, so now I have this selection. What do I do with this selection? We have a number of things that we can do with a selection. We can move the selection. I have the move tool. Watch how my cursor changes from the arrow keys there to a cut key. I can actually move those pixels, which can be fun, not always the best thing to do. I can actually copy these pixels and put them on a new layer. I'm just hitting Control C and Control V on my keyboard. Now you can see a new layer has appeared that has the new information on it. And now I can move that information. Not particularly appealing in this case, but it has its purposes. I'll just leave kind of a double image there just because I feel like it. Alright, actually, I'm going to take a couple steps back. That's the Control-Alt-Z to step back. Alright, so I've moved, I've copied and pasted. I can just delete it. I can just hit the delete key and make those pixels go away, and whatever my background color is, that's what's going to fill with there. I'm going to undo that. I can make specific color adjustments to that area. Let's say let's change the hue and saturation just for that area. I'm going to pop up the saturation, and I'm even going to change the hue. There we go. That's beautiful. Control H to hide. The selection is still there, but I can't see it. Just so I can. That's great for looking at what you've done to a photograph without actually getting. Because you may want to look at what the manipulation has done, but you still want the selection. Control H again brings that selection back. Ugly as sin. Have no idea why I did that. That was terrible, terrible. But we can. What I'm trying to show you here is how powerful selections can be. It gives us the ability to work in very specific areas of the photograph. That's what we're looking at here. One last thing I do want to show you before we move on that I want you to see, because we're going to ask you to do this in the assignment. We can also transform pixels that are selected. That's Control T on the keyboard. You can also access a whole bunch of transform commands through the edit menu item. Obviously you can see here. I'm just going to hit Control T, which is this free transform. So click in there, Control T. Now you see I have these nodes, and I can actually stretch and squeeze these pixels. And I'm going to squeeze these actually. I'm going to take a couple steps back because I want to show you something else here. So Control-Alt-Z. Well, I think Control-Alt-Z. Oh, that's not working right now. I'm going to hit Enter, and then I'm going to hit Control-Z. There we go. Okay, so Control-T. Notice that I was able to stretch it and squeeze it in ways that were completely unnatural. That is bad. There are some design purposes for that, but most of the time you do not want to do that. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to hold Shift. And Shift in Adobe programs is almost completely exclusively constrain proportions. So what's going to happen is now if I hold Shift, you can see that my aspect ratio is not going to change. I'm not squeezing those pixels into very odd spaces. So I can do some kind of artistic fun thing here like that. Yeah. That actually looks relatively appealing. Not necessarily fantastic, but I think if we didn't have that weird hue thing I did over there, it would actually look a little bit better. But very cool feature, and you guys are going to be doing that in the assignment. So hopefully you're beginning to see the power of selections, how much fun it can be. Have fun on that exercise. Give yourself lots of time. There's actually a lot of nuances that you're gonna learn about selection tools, like with the For instance, the freeform tools, the lasso tools, you can actually, with keys on the keyboard, jump back and forth between all of the different lasso tools. Very cool features. So enjoy that. Your first compositing assignment should be pretty exciting. I'm excited to see how you guys do.